In the Season 1 episode Sleepy Time, SpongeBob accidentally walks into Gary the Snail's dream and finds the small, meowing pet sitting upright in a smoking jacket, surrounded by an enormous personal library, speaking in the calm, educated voice of a scholar. Gary annoyedly asks his owner whether he really thought the snail's shell was full of hot air. The episode treats the moment as a quick joke. It is not a joke. It is the show quietly admitting that the smallest character in the Pineapple House has the deepest mind in the entire ocean. SpongeBob has been doing this for 25 years, hiding the heaviest truths in the smallest moments. Building a children's cartoon on top of nuclear bombs, lost tapes, banned episodes, dead mothers, locked vaults, and characters whose real natures live just beneath their cheerful surfaces. Tonight, 10 of the deepest mysteries and theories in Bikini Bottom, all confirmed through the show, the creators, or the cast themselves. Welcome to Cartoonology. Let us begin. The Bikini Atoll Theory, confirmed canon. Picture an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 3 palm trees on a small patch of sand, surrounded by a ring of coral reef, sitting halfway between Hawaii and the Philippines. That island shows up in the SpongeBob theme song. It floats in the background during establishing shots. It is a real place. It is called Bikini Atoll, and it sits in the Marshall Islands, and the United States military used it to test nuclear bombs from 1946 all the way through 1958, 67 nuclear tests, 23 of them at Bikini Atoll specifically. The most powerful one was called Castle Bravo, set off on March 1st, 1954, and it was so destructive it wiped out 3 islands and left lasting radiation in the surrounding water for decades. Before all of this, 146 people lived on Bikini Atoll. The US military forced them to leave their homes. They were promised they could come back once the testing was done. They never really got to. The radiation was too severe. Now think about the name of the town SpongeBob lives in, Bikini Bottom. It is sitting directly under Bikini Atoll. The name is not some random pun. The geography lines up exactly. And once a person notices that, the next question becomes obvious. Why does a sponge in this specific patch of ocean wear pants and flip burgers and have a job and drive a boat and date a squirrel? Why does a starfish under that same water sleep under a rock and speak English? Why is a crab running a fast food restaurant? A theory popped up on Reddit years ago, posted by a user named Capmaster, suggesting the answer was simple: the bombs. The radiation from all those nuclear tests sank into the water, and over the decades, it changed the sea creatures living down there. It mutated them. They started talking. They started building cities. They started behaving like humans. SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Sandy, Mr. Krabs, Plankton, Pearl, Gary, every single one of them is the result of nuclear fallout sinking into the ocean and twisting normal sea life into something stranger. Even Sandy fits the theory in a weird way. Chipmunks were kept on Navy ships during the testing period. A squirrel in a special protective suit, breathing oxygen, living underwater, fits that history almost too well. For a long time, this stayed in the realm of fan speculation. People argued about it on forums. They made YouTube videos. Nickelodeon put out a statement at one point, insisting the show was just set in Bikini Bottom, with no comment on the deeper meaning. Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob himself, was asked about the theory back in 2015 and said it was not true. He confirmed the town was named after Bikini Atoll, but he denied the radiation angle. So fans had to live with a theory that made way too much sense and a creator-side response that kept pushing back on it. Then, in 2024, something happened that changed everything. The full main cast of SpongeBob sat down for an interview with Esquire to celebrate the show's 25th anniversary. They were asked about fan theories. Roger Bumpus, the voice of Squidward, brought up the Bikini Atoll theory as one he had always personally enjoyed. He said something along the lines of how he liked the idea that the whole show was tied to the atomic testing that happened at Bikini Atoll. And then Mr. Lawrence, who plays Plankton and has written many of the show's episodes going back to the very beginning, looked at him and said it was true. Not as a joke, not as a maybe. He said the theory was absolutely true, that this was part of the fun of building the show, that the writers were always quietly seeing how far they could take the idea of Bikini Bottom being a nuclear test site without making it explicit. Bumpus actually laughed and said he had been telling people for years it was not true. Mr. Lawrence corrected him. It was true the whole time. For people who had spent years arguing this theory online, that moment in the Esquire interview was the closest thing to an official answer they were ever going to get. A writer who has been there since the start, voicing one of the show's main characters, confirming that yes, the radiation explains the world of SpongeBob. That the strange creatures, the talking, the human-like lives, all of it traces back to those bombs going off above them in the 1940s and 1950s. The visual evidence backs this up too. One of the bombs detonated at Bikini Atoll was set off underwater on purpose, and the explosion was photographed. The shape of that underwater blast, the way the water rises and spreads, has been quietly recreated in the show every time something blows up. Fans have done frame-by-frame comparisons. The mushroom shape in episodes like Dying for Pi matches the actual nuclear test photos. The 1940s and 1950s fashion that shows up across Bikini Bottom, the diner aesthetic, the old-fashioned cars, the boating culture, all of it points to the era when the testing was happening. But Mr. Lawrence did not stop at confirming the radiation theory. He went further, and this is where things get genuinely dark. In the same interview, he mentioned that the original concept for the show, back when it was first being developed, included a much heavier idea. The idea was that the entire human world had been wiped out. Some kind of nuclear war or mass disaster had ended life on the surface. Everything up top was dead. Bikini Bottom, with its mutated talking sea creatures, was all that remained. The world upstairs was gone, and the only beings left to carry on any kind of civilization were these strange new creatures down at the bottom of the sea. That concept was scrapped early in the first season. The team decided not to go with such a bleak setup. SpongeBob is a children's show. A post-apocalyptic background where the entire human race had been killed off would have been a hard sell to Nickelodeon, so the idea got tucked away. But that origin story, the one that almost made it into the show, says something about how the creators thought about Bikini Bottom from day one. They were not just making a goofy cartoon about a sponge. They were imagining a world where these creatures were the survivors, where the cheerful, colorful, silly town was sitting on top of a real and terrible piece of human history. There are some bumps in this story, of course. Humans do show up in SpongeBob from time to time. The pencil that falls into the sea in Frankendoodle came from a man in a rowboat. Patchy the pirate appears in many episodes as a live-action character living above the water. David Hasselhoff has a role in the first SpongeBob movie. So the world upstairs is clearly not totally gone in the version of the show that actually aired. Mr. Lawrence's confirmation of the apocalyptic origin does not match perfectly with what fans see on screen. It was an early concept that got softened. Still, the core of the theory stands confirmed. Bikini Bottom is under Bikini Atoll. The bombs went off. The creatures who survived were changed. SpongeBob and his friends are, in a very real sense, the children of those nuclear tests. Every episode is set in a town built on top of one of the most damaged stretches of ocean on the planet. Once a person knows this, the show feels different. The cheerfulness of Bikini Bottom takes on a strange weight. The bright colors, the silly behavior, the over-the-top happiness, all of it is happening in a place that was poisoned for decades by human weapons. The locals do not know. They cannot know. They are too busy living their lives, working their jobs, fighting over secret formulas, throwing birthday parties for snails. The history that made them what they are is invisible to them, and there's something almost fitting about that. Real-world Bikini Atoll is still considered too radioactive for permanent human resettlement, even now, decades later. The people who were forced off that island in the 1940s have never been able to fully return home. The ocean around it is still recovering. The wildlife there is still being studied for the long-term effects. Whatever happened down there, in real life, kept happening for a very long time. The show built itself a world inside that exact spot and decided to make it a comedy. Bumpus's surprise during the Esquire interview is what makes the moment so memorable. He had spent years telling fans the theory was made up. He believed it himself. And then, a fellow cast member, someone who actually wrote the show, looked across the table and confirmed that the fans had been right the whole time. The theory that started on a Reddit thread, that lived in YouTube comment sections and message boards for over a decade, turned out to be exactly what the writers had been building all along. The show kept it quiet on purpose, letting it sit underneath everything, letting the audience figure it out if they wanted to, and letting the rest enjoy a yellow sponge cooking burgers without ever wondering why a yellow sponge can cook burgers in the first place. The radiation answer was hiding in plain sight. The location, the era, the shape of the explosions, the kinds of creatures, the fact that they could all talk and walk and live together. Everything pointed to it. The writers just never said it out loud until 2024. So the show is a comedy about nuclear mutation. The biggest cartoon for kids of the past 25 years is set in a town built on a real piece of weapons testing history. The creatures are mutants. The world they live in only only exists because of the bombs, and the people behind the show have known this from the very first season. That is the foundation. That is where Bikini Bottom comes from. That is the answer to why anything in this show works the way it does. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But if the radiation explains the talking sea creatures, and the cities, and the cars, and the jobs, it raises another question almost immediately. The radiation was not the same everywhere. Some places got hit harder than others. Some areas of the ocean would have been right at the edge of the testing zone, while others would have been deep inside the worst of it, which means somewhere out there, at the very bottom of the sea, in the deepest crater the bombs left behind, there should be creatures even stranger than the ones in Bikini Bottom. Creatures so far gone that the residents of the regular town would not even recognize them as the same kind of life. And SpongeBob actually went there once. He took the wrong bus, and he ended up in a place that has haunted fans for over 20 years. Section 2, Squidward's Suicide / Red Mist, the lost episode that wasn't. The internet has a long history of telling stories about cartoons that should not exist. Tapes that supposedly slipped out of studios. Episodes that were never meant to air. Footage so disturbing that the people who saw it could never go back to watching the show the same way. Most of these stories are fake. They are written by anonymous users on forums, copied and pasted across websites, embellished by each new person who tells them. They are scary stories for the digital age, written by fans for other fans. Out of all the lost episode stories ever written, one stands above the rest in terms of how widely it spread, how many people genuinely believed it for a while, and how it eventually crawled into the actual show it was pretending to be from. That story is called Squidward's Suicide. Some people know it as Red Mist. The two titles get used almost interchangeably, even though they refer to slightly different versions of the same nightmare. The original story was posted on April 6th, 2010 on a website called 7chan, in a section of the site dedicated to scary and supernatural content. It was written by an anonymous user who claimed to be a former intern at Nickelodeon Studios, working there in 2005 while finishing a degree in animation. The whole thing was framed as a confession, something the writer needed to get off his chest, something he had seen at work that he could not forget. The setup was simple. He and a few other interns were in the editing room with the lead animators and sound editors. They were there to do a final review of an upcoming Season 4 episode called Fear of a Krabby Patty. When the tape started playing, the title card on the screen did not say Fear of a Krabby Patty. It said Squidward's Suicide. At first, nobody panicked. The animators were known for putting fake, jokey title cards on rough cuts as inside jokes. One of the interns chuckled. They figured someone in the studio had a dark sense of humor and pressed play anyway. What followed, according to the story, was around 6 minutes of what looked at first like a normal SpongeBob episode. Squidward was practicing his clarinet in his room. He was preparing for a concert later that night. SpongeBob and Patrick were laughing outside, interrupting his practice. He yelled at them to be quiet. They apologized and walked away. Standard stuff. Then the episode jumped to the concert, and that is when things stopped being normal. The animation started skipping in odd ways. Frames repeated themselves while the audio kept moving normally, which should never happen in a finished cartoon. Squidward played his song badly, and the crowd booed him, except the booing did not sound like cartoon booing. It sounded mean. It sounded real. The camera cut to the audience, and SpongeBob was there in the front row, and SpongeBob was booing too, with an expression on his face that the character had never had in any other episode. The story claimed that as Squidward stood there at the front of the stage, the eyes of every character in the crowd changed. They turned into hyper-realistic eyes. Real-looking, bloodshot, wrong. SpongeBob's eyes, Patrick's eyes, every fish in the audience, all of them looking at Squidward with what the writer described as malice. The scene shifted again. Squidward was in his bedroom, sitting on his bed, head in his hands, and he was crying. The crying did not sound like Squidward. It sounded like a real person sobbing. The audio quality was different from the rest of the show. Then the camera moved closer, and Squidward looked up, and his eyes had changed too. The same hyper-realistic style. Blood was running down his face. The crying got louder. The room got darker. And then, according to the story, the screen cut to a still photograph, a real photograph of a deceased child. The story described the image in disturbing detail. Then a second image came, a different child, then a third. The interns in the editing room, the writer claimed, sat there frozen as the scenes kept escalating. The episode episode supposedly ended with Squidward sitting in a chair, followed by a sudden cut to black. The story closed with the writer saying that everyone in the room reacted differently. One person passed out, some left the studio and never came back. One intern reportedly experienced a severe mental health crisis days later. The original tape was confiscated by the police. Nobody could ever explain who had made the cut, or why, or how it had been delivered to Nickelodeon, disguised as a normal episode. That was the story. It went viral fast. It got copied to dozens of horror websites. It got read aloud on YouTube channels. It spawned thousands of fake recreations, with users editing footage of real SpongeBob episodes to look like the cursed version. Some of the recreations got millions of views. For a while, in the early 2000s, if a person typed Squidward's suicide into a search bar, they would find an entire small ecosystem of believers, debunkers, and amateur filmmakers, all building on the original story. Then a second version appeared, posted on August 9th, 2010 by a user named Chagnu, who at the time was active on a SpongeBob fan wiki. This version was called Red Mist. It expanded on the original. It added a new character, a Scottish fish salesman, who knocks on Squidward's door and warns him that the red mist is coming. Squidward ignores him. The mist comes anyway. The episode ends in violence again, but with new details, more surreal touches, longer scenes. Red Mist confused things. People started using both names interchangeably, even though they were two different stories by two different writers. The Red Mist version added the idea that the tape had been made by a now imprisoned Scottish animator. That gave fans a fake culprit to blame, which made the legend feel a little more solid. People started claiming the tape had been found in warehouses, discovered on beta cassettes, hunted for by collectors. None of this was real. There is no missing tape. There is no jailed Scottish animator. There is no episode called Fear of a Krabby Patty in the form the story describes. The whole thing is a piece of internet horror writing. But here is where the story takes a turn that nobody expected. In December 2019, Nickelodeon aired an episode of season 12 called SpongeBob in Random Land. The setup is that SpongeBob and Squidward are stuck driving a delivery truck and end up in a chaotic alternate reality where every door leads somewhere bizarre. They open one door after another, and weird things happen. Most of the doors are silly, goofy, surreal in the normal SpongeBob way, but one of the doors, when it opens, shows Squidward's face. Not regular Squidward, a version of him with the same hyper-realistic, blood-streaked eyes from the creepypasta, the same color palette, the same horrified expression, and the audio that plays in the background is the same screaming sound that fans associated with the lost episode. The shot lasts only a second. It is treated as a quick gag, but for anyone who knew the creepypasta, the reference was unmistakable. Nickelodeon had quietly given a wink to a piece of fan-made horror that the network had never officially acknowledged. The original artwork from the story, which had been drawn by fans imagining what the moment would look like, was now in the actual show. That moment changed how people talked about the legend. It went from being a story floating around on horror websites to being something the show itself had absorbed. The creepypasta crawled into the canon, not as a real lost episode, but as a recognized piece of SpongeBob's cultural footprint. The writers knew about it. The animators knew about it. They put it in. For some fans, that felt like a win. The story had become part of the show's actual history. For others, it felt strange. A piece of fan-made horror about a beloved character taking his own life had been folded into a children's cartoon. A monster of the internet's making had been given a small, official home inside the thing it was originally written to corrupt. The deeper reason the story stuck around in the first place is worth thinking about. SpongeBob is a happy show. Squidward is the unhappiest character in it. He is miserable. He is bad at everything he wishes he were good at. He hates his neighbors. He hates his job. He hates his life. The show plays this for laughs, but the truth of it sits there underneath the comedy. Squidward is depressed, not in a cartoon way, in a way that any adult watching can recognize. The creepypasta took that idea and pushed it into the worst possible place. It imagined what would happen if the show stopped pretending Squidward's misery was funny, if the writers leaned into the darkness instead of softening it, if a single bad performance, one too many humiliations, one final disappointment was the thing that broke him. That is part of why the story spread so fast. It was hitting at something the actual show had been quietly carrying for years. Squidward's pain was already there. The creepypasta just dragged it into the light and gave it the worst possible ending. Nickelodeon's quiet nod in Random Land suggests the people who make the show understand understand all of this. They know what fans see when they look at Squidward. They know the legend exists because the character invites that kind of reading. The reference is small enough that kids will not notice it, but it is there for anyone who remembers what the original story was about. The tape never existed. The intern was never real. The episode of Fear of a Krabby Patty does not exist either. At least, not in the form the story claims. But the legend, the fear, the way it stuck inside the SpongeBob fandom for over a decade, all of that is real. And the show eventually had to nod back at its own ghost. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The lost episode story was not the only thing the writers used to scare fans, though. Long before the creepypasta ever existed, the show itself was already telling its own ghost story inside the Krusty Krab. A story Squidward made up to mess with SpongeBob during a late-night shift. A story he swore he had invented out of nothing. And then, almost as soon as he finished telling it, the things in the story started actually happening around them. Section 3. The Hash-Slinging Slasher. The mystery that was never a mystery. Mr. Krabs has a moment of inspiration one evening at the Krusty Krab. A late customer shows up after closing, wanting a Krabby Patty, and Krabs realizes he could be making more money if the restaurant simply never closed. He announces, then and there, that the Krusty Krab will now be open 24 hours a day. SpongeBob is thrilled. Squidward looks like the floor has opened up beneath him. And just like that, the two of them are stuck working the night shift while their boss heads home to count his money. This is how the episode Graveyard Shift begins. It is the 16th episode of season 2, and it ranks as one of the most beloved episodes in the entire run of SpongeBob. It is the kind of half hour that turned a kid's cartoon into something fans still revisit 20 years later, because the episode does something that very few children's shows ever try. It builds a real ghost story, lets the audience genuinely believe in it for a few minutes, and then pulls the rug out in a way that somehow still leaves a strange feeling behind. The plot is straightforward. SpongeBob and Squidward are alone in the empty restaurant in the middle of the night. SpongeBob is happy. Squidward is bored out of his mind. To pass the time, and partly to scare SpongeBob into quitting the night shift, Squidward decides to tell a story. And the story he makes up on the spot becomes one of the most famous urban legends in the entire SpongeBob world. He calls the villain of his story the Hash-Slinging Slasher. According to Squidward, the slasher used to work at the Krusty Krab. He was a fry cook, just like SpongeBob, except much clumsier. One night, while cutting up Krabby Patty meat, he accidentally chopped off his own hand. He could not grow it back, the way SpongeBob can grow back his own arms, because he was not a sponge. So he replaced his missing hand with a rusty old spatula. Then, on his way home, a bus ran him over and killed him. And as a final insult, the Krusty Krab fired him at his own funeral. Now, every Tuesday night, the ghost of the slasher returns to the restaurant to take revenge. Squidward gives SpongeBob the 3 signs that supposedly mark the slasher's arrival. First, the lights will flicker on and off. Second, the phone will ring, and there will be no one on the other end. Third, the bus that killed the slasher will pull up outside, and the ghost will step off, walk across the street without looking both ways because he is already dead, and slowly approach the counter with his rusty spatula hand. Then he will get them. SpongeBob is terrified. Squidward starts laughing. He admits he made the whole thing up to scare him. SpongeBob is relieved. A few minutes later, the lights start flickering. This is the moment Graveyard Shift turns from a comedy bit into something stranger. SpongeBob and Squidward stand there, looking at the flickering lights, and you can see Squidward's face start to change. He blames the wiring. He blames the building. He insists there is a normal explanation. Then the phone rings. He picks it up. Silence on the other end. He tries to laugh it off. SpongeBob is already shaking. Outside the window, a bus pulls up. The doors open. A figure steps out, lit only from behind. A tall shadow with what looks like glowing red eyes and a spatula where his hand should be. Squidward goes white. He admits, finally, that he made up the story. But the story is happening anyway. The slasher is real. The two of them cower behind the counter as the figure walks slowly toward them, raises his spatula hand, and steps into the light. And he turns out to be a regular fish, just a guy, a new job applicant who thought he would come down in person to apply at the Krusty Krab. The spatula was just covered by his sleeve. The phone call earlier was him calling about the job and then hanging up because he got nervous. He is friendly. He is normal. The whole thing was a coincidence. That leaves one piece of the puzzle, the flickering flickering lights. The fish was outside on the bus when the light started flickering, so it was not him. SpongeBob and Squidward look up at the light switch. Standing there, flicking it on and off with a creepy grin, is Count Orlok, the vampire from the 1922 silent film Nosferatu. Not a parody, not a copy. The actual character, using actual still footage from the original German horror movie, dropped into a SpongeBob episode without a single word of explanation. SpongeBob waves, Squidward waves. They tell him to knock it off. The episode ends. This is where the mystery sneaks in. The hash-slinging slasher is a fake ghost story made up by a bored octopus. The slasher does not exist in the real world of Bikini Bottom. None of the events Squidward describes ever actually happened. There was never a clumsy fry cook who lost his hand. There was never a bus accident. There was never a funeral where someone got fired. The whole tale is invented on the spot to scare a coworker on a slow night. But Count Orlok is in the building. Not as a guest character introduced earlier in the episode. Not as someone the writers explained. He just appears in the final 10 seconds, standing by the light switch like he lives there. SpongeBob and Squidward both seem to recognize him. They are not surprised. They do not freeze in horror at the sight of an actual vampire. They sigh. They scold him like a neighbor who has been pulling pranks. The episode acts like Nosferatu is just a regular guy in Bikini Bottom who sometimes wanders into restaurants to mess with the lights. This is the real mystery of Graveyard Shift. The story Squidward made up turned out to be fake. The slasher was nothing, but the genuinely supernatural element, the actual vampire from a 100-year-old horror film, was treated like he had been around the whole time and was completely normal to everyone in the show. Why is Count Orlok in Bikini Bottom? The episode never answers this. He appears one more time in the same season in a quick gag, and then he comes back as a recurring background character years later in season 11 and in the prequel show Camp Coral, where he is treated as a regular member of the underwater community. So whatever he is, however he ended up under the sea, the show is consistent about it. He lives there. He hangs around. He occasionally messes with appliances. Nobody questions it. The episode was written by Mr. Lawrence, Jay Lender, and Dan Povenmire. Lender has said in interviews that the Nosferatu cameo was his idea. He thought it would be funny to drop one of the most famous horror villains in cinema history into a children's cartoon as a final punchline. Steven Hillenburg, the show's creator, signed off on it, and the team got the rights to use real footage of Max Schreck, the actor who played Orlok in 1922, in the show. There is a small layer of trivia that makes the whole thing even stranger. Graveyard Shift first aired in the United States on September 6th, 2002. That date happens to be Max Schreck's birthday. He was born on September 6th, 1879, more than a century before the episode aired. Whether this was a coincidence or a quiet tribute by the SpongeBob staff is unclear. The show has never confirmed it either way. What Graveyard Shift does, in the end, is build a perfect, double-layered mystery. The fake ghost story scares the audience, just like it scares SpongeBob. The audience watches the 3 signs come true and starts thinking maybe the slasher really is real. The episode pretends to commit to that idea for a few minutes. Then it pulls back, gives a normal explanation for almost everything, and quietly slips in a real supernatural figure standing right there at the light switch. The genius of it is that most viewers, especially kids watching the episode for the first time, do not even notice. The Nosferatu joke comes so fast at the end that it lands as a quick gag. The actual unsettling fact, the fact that an immortal vampire is a casual member of the Bikini Bottom community, gets swallowed up by the relief of finding out the slasher was just a job applicant. Looking back, there is something perfect about how the episode handles fear. SpongeBob and Squidward spend the whole night convinced they are being hunted by a ghost that does not exist, and they completely miss the fact that something genuinely strange is in the room with them the entire time. The thing that should be scaring them is right there. They never react to it. The world they live in is so weird that a vampire flicking the lights is just an annoyance. Graveyard Shift is also the first SpongeBob episode where the show really tested how far it could go with horror imagery aimed at children. The shadow on the wall, the booming voice, the bus pulling up at 3 in the morning, the figure stepping into frame with glowing red eyes. These are real horror techniques used in real horror movies. The animation team studied scary films when they put the episode together, and they used the same kinds of camera angles, the same lighting tricks, the same slow build of dread. The episode worked. It still works. It scared kids in 2002, and it still scares kids who watch it for the first time today. People talk about it as a comfort episode now, but anyone who watched it when they were small remembers the feeling of waiting for that bus bus to pull up. The story Squidward invented was not real, but the fear it created was, and the fear is what people remember. So here is the strange truth that Graveyard Shift leaves behind. The hash-slinging slasher was a lie. The job applicant was just a guy with a spatula and a sleeve. The phone call had a normal explanation. The bus was running late. Everything had a reason, except for the vampire by the light switch, who has never been explained, has never been justified, and has been quietly walking around the SpongeBob universe for over 20 years now, without anyone ever sitting down to say where he came from or why he is there at all. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That kind of casual, unanswered weirdness is everywhere in this show. The writers like to drop things and walk away from them. Some of these dropped things are background gags that do not really matter. Others are massive plot points that the show seems to know better than to ever explain on screen. There is one in particular that has been hiding in the Krusty Krab since the very first episode, locked away, guarded with paranoid intensity by Mr. Krabs, hunted endlessly by Plankton, and known by exactly one person in the entire history of the show, a person who took the answer with him when he died. Section 4, the Krabby Patty secret formula, the mystery Hillenburg took to his grave. Every long-running show has a few questions it refuses to answer, things the writers dangle in front of the audience for years, decades sometimes, knowing that part of what keeps people watching is the hope that one day the curtain will pull back and the truth will come out. SpongeBob has many of these, but none of them have lasted longer, none have pulled at the audience harder, and none have stayed locked up tighter than the recipe for a single sandwich. The Krabby Patty. It is the centerpiece of the entire show, the reason Mr. Krabs runs his restaurant, the reason SpongeBob comes to work every morning, the reason Plankton has spent over 25 years of his life in scheme after scheme, robot after robot, plan after plan, all aimed at the same goal. The reason the Krusty Krab sits at the top of the food world in Bikini Bottom, while the chum bucket across the street stays empty. Whatever is in the patty, it has driven nearly every major plot in the history of the show, and nobody has ever found out what it is. The first appearance of the Krabby Patty is in the very first episode of the series, Help Wanted, May 1st, 1999. SpongeBob walks into the Krusty Krab looking for a job. By the end of the episode, he is making patties and serving them to a swarm of hungry fish. From that moment on, the patty becomes the engine that keeps the show running. Plankton appears in his first proper episode and immediately tries to steal it. Mr. Krabs immediately defends it. The dynamic is locked in by the second episode of the entire run. The thing that makes the formula such a good mystery is how seriously the show treats it. Mr. Krabs guards it like a national secret. He keeps the original recipe locked away in a vault that has been broken into, dropped into the ocean, hidden under his mattress, taped to the back of paintings, eaten, frozen, buried, and lost dozens of times across the show's run. Every episode that focuses on the formula treats it like the most valuable object in the entire ocean. People go to war over it. People die for it. The plot of the very first SpongeBob movie is built around it. The plot of the second SpongeBob movie is also built around it. The fact that the audience has been watching characters fight over this thing for a quarter of a century without ever finding out what it actually is should feel ridiculous. Somehow, it never does. The show has played with the audience over the years. There have been moments where it looked like the formula was finally going to be revealed. None of these moments paid off. In Season 3, an episode called Plankton's Army shows Plankton and his enormous group of relatives breaking into the Krusty Krab vault. They get to the formula. Plankton actually reads it out loud. According to the paper in his hand, the Krabby Patty contains 4 heaping pounds of freshly ground plankton. He panics. Mr. Krabs has tricked him. The real formula is hidden under Krabs' mattress, and the version in the vault was a fake, meant to humiliate Plankton if he ever made it that far. In Season 5, an episode called Spy Buddies has SpongeBob and Patrick playing detective to protect the formula. At one point, the recipe appears on screen as a math problem. X minus 2 plus 1 equals Krabby Patty. Useless to anyone reading it, just another tease. In Season 6, in the episode Krabby Road, the formula appears again, this time on a piece of paper that the camera lingers on long enough for the audience to actually try and read it. The writing on the paper turns out to be gibberish, random letters, nonsense. The animators drew nothing on it because they did not want to commit to anything that fans could later use to claim a real answer existed. These 3 moments form a pattern. Whenever the show gets close to the formula, the writers slam the door. They do it in different ways, with different gags, but the message message is always the same. The audience does not get to know. Behind the scenes, this was deliberate. Steven Hillenburg, the show's creator, decided very early on that the formula would never be revealed. He believed that the moment the audience knew what was in the patty, the entire engine of the show would lose its power. The mystery had to stay a mystery, so he kept the answer to himself, and that is exactly what he did. Hillenburg was the only person who knew. He never wrote it down in any official document. He never shared it with the writer's room. He never gave it to the network. He kept it in his own head, locked away the same way Mr. Krabs locks the formula in the vault. Vincent Waller, who became the showrunner in later years, has confirmed this multiple times in interviews. He has said directly that Hillenburg was the only person who had ever seen the real recipe. When Hillenburg passed away in November 2018 from ALS, the formula went with him. The man who built Bikini Bottom from the ground up, who created SpongeBob in his own kitchen during a surfing trip in Baja California in 1994, who had pitched the show with a Hawaiian shirt and an underwater terrarium full of toy characters, took his last and biggest secret out of the show forever. Whatever the formula was, whatever he had imagined when he first sat down to draw the Krusty Krab, no one alive knows it. Vincent Waller said in 2017 that he would not count on the formula ever being revealed in the show. After Hillenburg's death in 2018, that statement took on a new weight. The chance had passed. The decision had become permanent. There is one piece of information about the patty that has been confirmed, and it actually goes against what most fans assumed for years. The most common dark theory about the patty was that it secretly contained crab meat, Mr. Krabs grinding up his own kind. There was even a moment in the season 3 episode Midlife Crustacean where Mr. Krabs eats a Krabby Patty and says, with a strange look on his face, that this is what he tastes like. Fans took that as a hint. They built whole videos around it. In 2017, Vincent Waller was asked directly at San Diego Comic-Con what was in a Krabby Patty. He said he was not allowed to give the full answer, but he did confirm one thing. There is no meat in the Krabby Patty. There is no animal product of any kind. Hillenburg had decided this from the beginning. The patty is a vegetarian burger. Whatever else it contains, it does not contain crab. It does not contain any creature from the sea. The crab meat theory, which had haunted dark corners of the fandom for years, was officially dead. Mr. Lawrence, the writer and voice of Plankton, expanded on this later. He said the show's writers were not allowed to depict fish eating fish as food. The world of Bikini Bottom has its own internal rules, and one of them is that the talking, walking sea creatures are not eating each other. The chum bucket sells chum, which is messy and gross, but it is the only place in town that even gets close to that line. The Krusty Krab does not cross it. Tom Kenny, who voices SpongeBob, has joked many times that the secret ingredient is hummus. Carolyn Lawrence, the voice of Sandy, has her own answer. She believes the secret ingredient is love. The love SpongeBob puts into making the patty, the care he takes with every order, the pride he feels in his work. She has said in interviews that she is being completely serious. She thinks that is the answer. There is some support for this in the show itself. In an early episode called Plankton, Mr. Krabs tells his rival that the formula is nothing without love, and that without that single missing element, the patty does not work. King Neptune, in another episode, tries to make perfect Krabby Patties using magic, and his patties come out badly because, as SpongeBob points out, perfect patties are made with love, not with magic. The show keeps coming back to this idea. The thing that makes the patty work is something nobody can write down, something nobody can steal, something that lives in the fry cook himself. Then there is the simplest theory of all, the one that has gained more traction in recent years. It says the formula does not exist, that it is empty, that Mr. Krabs invented the idea of a secret formula as a marketing trick to keep people obsessed with the Krusty Krab. As long as everyone in town believes the patty has some kind of magic in it, they keep coming back. They tell their friends. They build the place into a legend. Plankton, who has bought into the legend more than anyone, spends his entire life chasing something that was never there to begin with. Mr. Krabs gets rich off a sandwich made from regular ingredients, and the only thing protecting his business is the lie that there is something special in the recipe. This theory fits Mr. Krabs' character perfectly. He is greedy, he is sneaky, he has done worse things for less money. The idea that he invented a fake mystery to crush his competition forever feels exactly like something he would do. There is one episode called Patty Caper that pushes against this theory, because it shows a real secret ingredient being delivered to the restaurant under heavy guard. So the formula is something. Something specific gets gets added to the patty. But what that something is, again, was known to one person, and that person is gone. The list of theories about the formula goes on forever. King Neptune's powder, mentioned in one episode and dropped immediately after. A pinch of magic, a type of seaweed nobody else has access to. A drug, a chemical, the blood of a sea creature, something from another planet. Fans have written entire novels worth of guesses online. None of them are confirmed. None of them ever will be. What makes this mystery different from almost every other secret in modern television is the silence around it. There is no leaked script. There is no whispered answer at a convention. There is no behind-the-scenes documentary that reveals the truth. The cast, in their 25th anniversary interview, all confirmed that they themselves do not know. Tom Kenny, who has been the voice of SpongeBob since the beginning, has spent his entire career playing the only character who actually makes the patties on a daily basis. He has done thousands of recording sessions. He has read scripts that mention the formula countless times, and in 2024, he sat in front of an interviewer and said, very seriously, that even he does not know. SpongeBob would not tell him. The cast laughed about it. They turned it into a bit, but underneath the joke is the actual truth, which is that the people who have lived inside this show for a quarter of a century are just as locked out of the answer as the rest of the audience. The mystery is not a writer's room trick. It is a real, sealed-off secret that lived in one person's head and has now disappeared. There is something almost beautiful about that. In an age where every show explains itself to death, every fan theory eventually gets answered in a podcast or a behind-the-scenes book, every mystery gets unwound for the audience that demands closure, SpongeBob has held the line. The formula stays unknown. Hillenburg's choice has held up for over 25 years and counting. Every new showrunner, every new writer, every new movie, every new spin-off, all of them have stayed away from the answer, out of respect for the man and out of respect for the joke he was telling. The Krabby Patty works because nobody knows what is in it. The moment somebody knows, the magic breaks. So Plankton keeps trying. Mr. Krabs keeps protecting it. SpongeBob keeps cooking it. The formula stays in its vault. The vault sits in a restaurant shaped like a lobster trap. The restaurant sits at the bottom of the ocean. The ocean is full of mutated talking creatures who happily eat the patty without ever asking what is in it. And somewhere, locked away in a place no fan can ever reach, is a recipe that Stephen Hillenburg knew, that Stephen Hillenburg loved, and that Stephen Hillenburg refused to share with anyone, ever, for any reason, all the way to the end of his life. That is the kind of secret most stories cannot pull off. Most stories give in. They reveal the answer because the writers feel bad making the audience wait. SpongeBob never gave in. The man who made it understood that some questions are more interesting than the answers, and he protected that idea like it was the most important thing in the show. It might be. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There is another mystery in this show that Hillenburg defended with the same stubbornness, though. Another secret he refused to ever solve, even when the network pushed for it, even when the writers had a draft ready, even when fans had been begging for an explanation for years. This one is not about a sandwich. It is about a family, a boss with a daughter who, by every rule of how the natural world is supposed to work, should not exist. Section 5. Pearl Crabs and the Whale Mother Mystery. Mr. Krabs is a crab, a small, red, hard-shelled crustacean with claws and beady eyes. Everything about him fits what a crab is supposed to look like. He has the body, the shell, the proportions. He looks like he could fit on a dinner plate at a seaside restaurant. His daughter is a whale, not a small whale, not a baby anything. Pearl Krabs is a full teenage sperm whale. She towers over her father. She towers over almost every other character in the show. She has the smooth gray skin, the giant blunt head, the spout on top, the deep voice. She lives with Mr. Krabs in a hollow anchor. She calls him Daddy. She is, by every word the show uses, his biological daughter. Nobody in Bikini Bottom seems to think this is strange. Pearl walks around the mall, goes to school, hangs out with her teenage friends, throws birthday parties, gets embarrassed by her father, asks him for money. Mr. Krabs treats her like any father treats a daughter. He worries about her, spoils her, sometimes says no, sometimes gives in. The show plays it completely straight. The tiny crab and the enormous whale are family, and that is just how the world works. For viewers, this raises a question that never goes away. How? How is a crab the father of a whale? The simplest answer would be that Pearl is adopted. The show has never said this. In fact, the show has gone out of its way to to imply the opposite. Pearl is repeatedly described as Mr. Krabs' daughter without any qualifier. There is no episode where she finds out she was adopted. There is no flashback to a different family. The show treats her, again and again, as biologically his. Steven Hillenburg, the show's creator, was asked about this many times over the years. He received letters. He received emails. Fans wanted an explanation. According to Vincent Waller, who became the showrunner after Hillenburg, the questions about Pearl came in constantly, year after year, letter after letter. Where did Pearl come from? Who is her mother? How does a crab and a whale produce a child? Tell us. Please tell us. Hillenburg's answer was always the same. No. He decided, very early on, that Pearl's origin was something the show would never explain on screen. The same way he protected the Krabby Patty formula, he protected the question of where Pearl came from. He believed the mystery was funnier than the answer. He believed that solving it would weaken the show, so he refused. There was, at one point, an actual attempt to give Pearl an origin episode. According to Vincent Waller, during the production of Season 5, the writer's room actually started developing a special double-length episode that would explain Pearl's family. They wrote a step outline. They started discussing scenes. The episode would have shown her mother, told the story of how she came into Mr. Krabs' life, filled in the entire background that fans had been begging for. Hillenburg killed it. He said no. He said the episode was not going to happen. He shut it down before it ever got past the early stages of development. The outline was shelved. The writers moved on. Whatever they had come up with, whatever ideas they had for Pearl's mother, those ideas have never been published, never been shared at conventions, never been leaked. They sit somewhere in the studio archive, possibly on a shelf, possibly in a drawer, never to see the light. Hillenburg passed away in 2018, and like the Krabby Patty formula, that potential answer went with him. What the show has confirmed about Pearl's mother comes from outside the actual episodes. In 2000, a writer on the show named David Fain put together an official trivia book about SpongeBob. In that book, there is a line that explains, in writing, that Pearl is a whale because she takes after her mother. So Pearl's mother was also a whale, a sperm whale like her daughter. Mr. Krabs was once married to her. Pearl is the biological child of that marriage. The book uses Mrs. Krabs as a name for her, but that is a placeholder more than an actual identity. Hillenburg never approved a real name for the character. She has no design. She has never been drawn officially. She has no voice actress. She does not exist visually anywhere in the canon of the show. She is a sentence in a book. That is the entirety of her existence. This still leaves the obvious question untouched. How does a crab marry a whale? And how do they have a child together? The show does not answer this. The trivia book does not answer this. Hillenburg refused to answer this. The world of Bikini Bottom seems to operate on its own rules, where species do not really matter when it comes to family. Patrick is a starfish. His parents are starfish, but his sister, who appeared in a later season, is an entirely different shape and color. The squirrel lives underwater in an air bubble. The vampire is just a normal neighbor. The rules of biology in this show seem to bend whenever the writers want them to. What happened to Pearl's mother is its own separate mystery. The show has never said. There has never been a flashback, a photograph, a memorial, a tombstone, a reference to her death, a reference to a divorce, a reference to anything. She is simply not there. The pictures of Pearl growing up, shown in the season 4 episode Selling Out, all feature Mr. Krabs alone with baby Pearl. He bottle feeds her. He teaches her to breach. He raises her by himself. The mother is absent in every single image. In another episode called Bossy Boots, Mr. Krabs explains that he had to teach Pearl how to do important whale things on his own because there was nobody else to teach her. He had to figure out how to raise a whale child as a single father. He had to learn how to make her happy, how to feed her, how to raise her into the teenager she eventually becomes. He did all of it alone. In 2015, Lori Allen, the voice actress who plays Pearl, and Roger Bumpus, the voice of Squidward, were asked at a convention what happened to Pearl's mother. They laughed. They turned it into a joke. Bumpus said 2 words, SeaWorld, implying that Mrs. Krabs had been captured by humans and taken to a marine park. The audience laughed. It was a joke. But it landed in a place that fans had already been quietly thinking about for years, because there is one detail in the show, present from the very beginning, that has always pointed to a much darker possibility. Mr. Krabs is terrified of hooks. This is established early. In the season 2 episode Hooky, Mr. Krabs goes into a state of pure panic when SpongeBob and Patrick start playing on fish hooks that are descending from the surface. He warns them with shaking hands and a voice cracking with fear that hooks are deadly, that hooks have taken people he loved, that hooks are not a game. He pleads with them to stay away from the hooks. He tells SpongeBob what happens to the fish who get caught. They get pulled up to the surface. They get cooked. They get eaten. They are never seen again. This level of terror seems extreme even for Mr. Krabs. He is afraid of plenty of things, but most of his fears connect to money. Hooks are not about money. Hooks are about death. And the way he speaks about them, the way his voice changes, the way his entire personality shifts when hooks appear, suggests that this is a personal pain. Something happened to him, something with hooks, and whatever it was, he carries it with him every day. In 2015, a fan theorist named John Negroni proposed an idea about Pearl's mother that fits this fear of hooks too well to ignore. The theory was originally drawn as a comic by another fan, and Negroni built it into a full piece. The theory goes like this. Mr. Krabs once lived a normal life. He was married to a whale named Mrs. Krabs. They had a baby together. One day, Mrs. Krabs swam too close to the surface and was caught by human fishermen. They killed her. They left her body floating in the water. Mr. Krabs found her there, with baby Pearl beside her. The mother had been killed by a hook. Mr. Krabs took the baby home and raised her by himself. He has been afraid of hooks ever since, because hooks are what took the only person he ever loved. The theory holds together. It explains why Mr. Krabs has such an intense fear of hooks, despite being a crab who would normally never be at risk from them. It explains why he is willing to do anything for Pearl. It explains why he gives her money and gifts when he gives nothing to anyone else. It explains why she is always at the center of his life, despite his obsession with profit. It explains why he is a single father with no real explanation for the missing mother. It explains why the photos in Selling Out only ever show him with her, never the mother. It explains why the show has been so careful, so deliberate about never bringing the mother back into the story. It also explains, in a way that feels almost too neat, the connection between his fear of hooks and his obsession with money. If his wife had been killed in front of him by humans, the surface world would forever after represent loss. The Krusty Krab is a building shaped like a lobster trap. He has built his entire empire on top of an object designed to capture sea creatures and kill them. The trap is right there in the name. He turned the very thing that destroys his kind into the symbol of his success. That is a strange place to build a restaurant, unless there is something deeper going on, some way of trying to control, every single day, the thing that hurt him most. The theory has gotten so popular over the years that fans now treat it like an unofficial second canon. The show has never confirmed it. Vincent Waller has, in fact, said the theory is wrong. The trivia book version, where Mrs. Krabs simply existed and is no longer around without explanation, is the official answer. But many fans prefer the hook theory because it gives the show a kind of emotional weight that the official version lacks. It explains things the show has shown us without needing to use words. There is one more piece of canon that fans have used to support a darker reading. Pearl is a teenage sperm whale, and sperm whales in the real world are massive, deep-diving, intelligent ocean creatures. Pearl shows hints of intelligence the show never quite explores. She is good at math. She remembers things. She picks up on things faster than most other characters. The show even acknowledges, in the episode Bubble Troubles, that her biology is different. She is a mammal. She breathes air. She helped save Sandy by sharing oxygen through her blowhole. The show reminds us, every now and then, that Pearl is genuinely a whale, and whales have real biology that the show is willing to nod to. That makes her existence in the show even stranger. She is treated as a normal teenager who happens to be a whale, but she is, biologically, a different kind of being from her father in nearly every way. Mammal versus crustacean, air-breathing versus sea-living, massive versus tiny, long-lived versus short-lived. None of this matches. None of it can match. And the show simply asks the audience to stop thinking about it. Stephen Hillenburg's reason for never solving this mystery, in his own words to Vincent Waller, was that some answers are not worth giving. Pearl's existence is funnier than her origin would be. Her presence in the show, as a whale, with a crab father, in a town where nobody questions any of it, is a joke that keeps working as long as nobody pulls back the curtain. Pull the curtain, and the joke stops being funny. Pull the curtain, and you have to deal with the death of a mother, the heartbreak of a father, the orphaning of a baby. The show would have to slow down. It would have to feel things it does not normally feel. It would have to become a different kind of show. So Hillenburg refused. The episode never got made. The mother stayed unnamed. Mr. Krabs stayed afraid of hooks. Pearl stayed a teenage whale calling a crab her father. The audience stayed in the dark, and Hillenburg took that decision with him him too, the same way he took the formula with him. Two of the biggest unsolved questions in the show, two of the most asked things by fans, two answers that lived in the head of one man and died with him. The mystery of Pearl is also, in its own way, one of the cleanest examples of how the writers think about the show. They build emotional weight into things and then refuse to explain it. Mr. Krabs' fear of hooks is treated as a joke and as a tragedy at the same time. Pearl's relationship with her father is loving, embarrassing, complicated, and very human, even though one of them is a crab and the other is a whale. The show holds all of this in place without ever drawing attention to it. The strangeness sits there, quiet, waiting for someone to notice. There is another character in the show who works a little like that, someone who looks one way on the surface and reveals something completely different the deeper you look. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Someone who has been called the laziest, the angriest, the greediest, and the most foolish character in their own friend group, depending on who is doing the labeling. A theory about all of them, one that connects every member of the main cast to a single ancient list, has been floating around the internet for years, and recently, a writer on the show finally weighed in on whether it was true. Section 6. The 7 Deadly Sins Theory. There is an old idea, one that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, used in religious teachings across the Christian world. The idea is that there are 7 kinds of bad behavior so harmful, so corrosive to a person's soul, that they have been classified and named. These are the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, sloth. The list shows up in old paintings. It shows up in literature like Dante's Inferno. It shows up in modern movies like the David Fincher thriller Seven, where each of the murders is themed around one of the sins. The idea has lasted because it captures something real. People recognize themselves in the list. They recognize the people around them in the list. The 7 traits are universal in a way that most religious ideas are not. A theory has been floating around the SpongeBob fandom for over a decade now that suggests every single one of the show's main characters maps directly onto one of these 7 sins. 1 character per sin, 7 sins, 7 main characters. The math works, the personalities fit, and in 2024, during the Esquire reunion interview, a writer on the show actually addressed this theory and said something that stunned fans who had been arguing about it for years. Before getting to that, the theory itself needs to be laid out, because the way the characters fit is genuinely uncanny once a person starts looking. Mr. Krabs is greed. This one barely needs explaining. The show has built his entire personality around money. He hoards every cent. He pays SpongeBob almost nothing, despite SpongeBob being the best fry cook in the ocean. He charges customers for breathing. He lies, cheats, schemes, and even endangers his own friends to make a profit. There's an episode in season 2 called Squid on Strike, where SpongeBob and Squidward go on strike against the Krusty Krab because Mr. Krabs has been charging them for things that should be free. He nickel and dimes everyone in his life. His daughter Pearl is the only person he ever spends money on, and even with her, he resists. The first dollar he ever earned hangs framed in his office, which says everything about him in one image. Greed is not just a part of Mr. Krabs' personality. Greed is his entire personality. The connection is so obvious that nobody really argues about it. Plankton is envy. He runs a competing restaurant called the Chum Bucket, directly across the street from the Krusty Krab. His restaurant fails. His food is bad. Nobody comes in. And rather than try to make better food, rather than improve his own product, his entire life has become about stealing what Mr. Krabs has. Plankton does not actually want to feed people. He does not love cooking. What he wants, with every fiber of his tiny body, is to take away what someone else has built. There is even a season 3 episode called The Algae's Always Greener, where Plankton uses a machine to swap lives with Mr. Krabs. He gets to be the owner of the Krusty Krab. He gets the money, the success, the daughter, and he is still miserable. Because envy is not really about wanting what someone else has. Envy is about hating that they have it. Plankton's wife Karen, the supercomputer he is married to, has spent decades listening to him complain about his rival. The fit is exact. Patrick is sloth. The starfish lives under a literal rock. He sleeps for hours. He does not have a job. He does not have any responsibilities. He has, on multiple occasions, seasons, been so lazy that the show has used him as a punchline for the entire concept of laziness. There is an episode where Patrick has to take care of a job for one day and the entire town nearly collapses. Sloth, in the religious sense, is not just about being tired. It is about a refusal to engage with the world, a refusal to grow, a refusal to do anything about your own situation. Patrick has been the same person from season 1 onward. He has not learned anything. He has not changed. He has not improved. He simply exists, eats, naps, and follows SpongeBob around. There is something almost peaceful about it, but there is also something deeply still and unmoving. The character lives the sin completely. Squidward is wrath, anger, rage that has nowhere to go and so settles into bitterness. Squidward is angry from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to sleep. He is angry at SpongeBob. He is angry at Patrick. He is angry at his job. He is angry at his neighbors. He is angry at his rival Squilliam. He is angry at the world for not recognizing his talent. His default mode is annoyed, and his peak mode is shouting. The season 2 episode Dying for Pie shows how dark his wrath can run. He believes he has accidentally given SpongeBob a bomb disguised as a pie, and the episode tracks his slow horror at realizing he has actually killed someone he secretly cares about. The wrath is real. It just usually points in directions that are easier to laugh at. Sandy is pride. She is by far the smartest character in the main cast. She knows it. She is also a Texan, and the show has built her entire identity around how proud she is of her home state. She brags about Texas constantly. She sings songs about Texas. She gets into fights with characters who insult Texas. She is also proud of her science, her strength, her karate, her air helmet, her tree dome. Pride is the trickiest of the 7 sins because almost everyone has some of it, but Sandy carries it as a defining trait. There is a season 2 episode called Squirrel Jokes, where SpongeBob makes jokes about squirrels at a comedy club, and Sandy is so deeply offended, so injured by the disrespect, that she actually goes after him. Her sense of self is something she will not let anyone touch. Gary is gluttony. He is constantly hungry. The plot of multiple episodes revolves around feeding him. He has run away from home over food. He has betrayed SpongeBob over food. He has, on at least one occasion, joined an entire other species over food. The season 5 episode, Have You Seen This Snail?, shows Gary leaving SpongeBob because he was not being fed properly, going to live with a strange old woman who feeds him until he can barely move, and then getting trapped in a horrifying situation that the episode plays mostly for laughs, but is actually quite dark. Gluttony is not just about eating. Gluttony is about consumption that does not stop, that has no off switch, that takes priority over everything else. Gary's meow is, more often than not, just him asking for more food. That leaves SpongeBob himself, and SpongeBob, according to the theory, is lust. This one confuses people more than any of the others. SpongeBob is the most childlike, most innocent character in the show. He has no romantic relationships of any real consequence. He does not chase anyone. He does not act in any way that fits the standard idea of lust. So how does the theory hold up? The answer is that the word lust does not only mean romantic or sexual desire. The dictionary definition includes a second meaning. Lust is intense passion. Lust is overwhelming desire. Lust is wanting something so badly that it consumes you. And SpongeBob, in this sense, is the most lustful character in the show. He has a lust for life, a lust for his job, a lust for friendship, a lust for approval, a lust for jellyfishing, for cooking, for laughing, for being useful, for being loved. He wants everything, all the time, with all of his heart. His desperation to be friends with Squidward, despite years of being told no, is a kind of lust in this older sense. His relentless need to please everyone, even people who treat him badly, is a kind of lust. His enthusiasm for every small thing in life is so intense that it borders on unhealthy. He cannot calm down. He cannot let anything be. He needs to engage. He needs to participate. He needs to want. That is what makes the lust assignment fit once a person stops thinking of the word in only one way. So that is the theory. 7 characters, 7 sins. Each one mapped onto a single deadly trait. SpongeBob is lust, Patrick is sloth, Squidward is wrath, Sandy is pride, Mr. Krabs is greed, Plankton is envy, Gary is gluttony. For years, fans treated this as a fun pattern, something that probably was not real, but was satisfying to think about. The argument against the theory was always the same. SpongeBob is a kid's show. The writers were not building a religious framework into a cartoon about a yellow sponge. The pattern is a coincidence. The characters fit because 7 7 types of personalities cover most of human experience anyway. Then, in 2024, the Esquire interview happened. The cast was sitting around a table together. They were being asked about fan theories. Some of the theories they laughed off, some they confirmed, some they had never heard of. When the 7 deadly sins theory came up, the cast started discussing it. Roger Bumpus, who plays Squidward, said he could see the connection for Patrick and Mr. Krabs, but did not see it for the others. Then Mr. Lawrence, the writer who voices Plankton, spoke up. He said something that fans had been waiting 25 years to hear. He explained that the show was built around the idea that each character would represent something. Not in a one-to-one religious way, but in the sense that each character had a single, defining trait that drove their behavior. He compared it to the old TV show Gilligan's Island, where every character on the island represented a specific archetype. The skipper, the professor, the movie star. Each one stood for something. Each one filled a specific role. He said that SpongeBob was built the same way, that the writers had thought about each character as representing a particular kind of human trait, a particular way of being in the world. He stopped short of saying the trait was specifically a sin from the religious list. He said the connections were not as exact as fans wanted them to be, but he confirmed the underlying logic. The show was built on a one character, one trait foundation. Each main character represents a single thing. The writers thought about it that way from the beginning. That was the closest thing to confirmation the theory has ever gotten. A writer who has been there since the start, voicing one of the main characters, sat down and said, yes, the framework you have all been seeing for years is real. The specific names you are putting on each character may not be perfect, but the structure underneath is something we built on purpose. What this opens up, for anyone who pays attention, is a new way of watching the show. Once a person starts to see each character as a single trait pushed to its extreme, the show starts to feel more like a moral story than a comedy. Watching Mr. Krabs in any episode is watching greed in action. Watching Plankton is watching envy in action. Watching Patrick is watching sloth in action. The show becomes a cycle of these traits bumping into each other, fighting with each other, occasionally finding harmony, and then breaking apart again the next week. There is even something poetic about how the show ends most of its episodes. The characters almost never grow. Mr. Krabs is just as greedy at the end of every episode as he was at the start. Squidward is just as angry. Patrick is just as lazy. The traits are locked in. They cannot escape themselves. They are caught in their own personalities forever, doing the same things in the same town, making the same mistakes, season after season, decade after decade. That is one of the things the 7 deadly sins traditionally represent. They are sins, in the religious sense, because they trap you, because they prevent growth, because they keep you stuck where you are. Wrath does not let go. Greed does not share. Envy does not appreciate. Sloth does not act. Pride does not bend. Lust does not rest. Gluttony does not fill up. The traits eat the people who carry them. SpongeBob, in its own way, has been showing this for 25 years. The characters never change. The town never changes. The traits never let go. The show plays it as comedy, but underneath, there is something almost religious about how rigidly each character is locked into their single defining flaw. They are not people. They are walking traits. They are the 7 deadly sins, animated, given voices, and dropped into a cheerful cartoon at the bottom of the sea, where they fight and stumble and laugh and cry without ever escaping themselves. The fact that Mr. Lawrence confirmed the framework, even partially, even with his careful language, was a moment fans had been waiting on for a long time. The theory is no longer just a theory. It is, at minimum, a confirmed structural decision the writers made when they built the show. Whatever names you want to put on the 7 traits, the 7 traits are there. They have been there since 1999. They will be there for as long as the show keeps going. The theory says something else, too, about the world the characters live in. If the 7 of them represent the worst traits a person can carry, then the town they live in is, in a strange way, a portrait of human weakness. Bikini Bottom is not just a cute underwater city. It is a place where the worst parts of people get to walk around in cartoon bodies and act them out without consequence. The show makes it look fun, but the picture it paints, when you step back, is genuinely unflattering. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That picture gets even darker when a person looks at the actual geography of the show. Bikini Bottom is the surface level of this strange world. There is a place much deeper, much harder to reach, much more dangerous, where things are even more broken. A place that takes the rules of Bikini Bottom and twists them. A place where SpongeBob and Patrick once accidentally found themselves themselves stranded, alone, unable to get home, surrounded by creatures whose behavior could not be explained by any normal logic. A place that may, in the end, hold the answer to why everything in this world is the way it is. Section 7. Rock Bottom, the Crater Theory. There are episodes of SpongeBob that scared an entire generation. Most of them are remembered fondly, looked back on with a kind of laughing dread. The hash-slinging slasher, Squidward's gas mask nightmare in Squilliam Returns, the transformation in I Was a Teenage Gary. These episodes have become legends in the show's history, talked about and rewatched and ranked in lists for over 20 years. But there is one episode that stands a little apart from the rest, an episode that did not lean on horror imagery to scare people, an episode that did not have ghosts or monsters or supernatural villains, an episode that scared kids with something quieter, stranger, and harder to put into words, an episode that fans still describe as one of the most unsettling things the show ever made, even though almost nothing in it should be considered scary on paper. The episode is called Rock Bottom. It is the 17th episode of Season 1. It first aired on March 15th, 2000. The setup is harmless. SpongeBob and Patrick are leaving Glove World, a glove-themed amusement park where they have spent the day having fun. They are tired. They are happy. SpongeBob is holding a balloon shaped like a glove, won as a prize from the park. They board what they think is the bus back to Bikini Bottom. They settle into their seats. The bus pulls out. A few minutes into the ride, something feels off. The bus is going down. Not forward, not sideways. Down. The road has tilted. The bus is descending at a sharp angle. SpongeBob looks out the window, and the world he knows is gone. The cheerful colors of Bikini Bottom have been replaced with deep blue darkness. The familiar buildings are nowhere in sight. The bus is plunging straight down into the abyss. When the bus finally stops, SpongeBob and Patrick step off into a town they have never seen before. A sign explains where they are, a place called Rock Bottom. Everything about it is wrong. The light is dim. The buildings are stranger. The streets feel emptier. The creatures who live there are deep sea animals, not the sea creatures of Bikini Bottom. Anglerfish, strange fish with bioluminescent lights hanging off their heads. Creatures with translucent skin, eyes too big or too small for their bodies. None of them look like the friendly, brightly colored fish back home. These look like real things from the deep ocean, the kind of fish marine biologists film with submarines. The locals try to talk to SpongeBob. He cannot understand them. They blow raspberries between every word, a kind of hissing buzz that breaks up everything they say into nonsense. SpongeBob tries to ask simple questions. Which bus goes back home? When does the next one leave? Where is the schedule? Every person he asks gives him an answer in this same broken raspberry language. He cannot follow any of it. Patrick gets nervous. He sees the next bus to Bikini Bottom pull up before SpongeBob even realizes it has arrived. Patrick gets on. The doors close. The bus pulls away. SpongeBob, who had stepped off to look at a vending machine, watches it go without him. He is now alone in Rock Bottom. What follows is one of the most quietly terrifying sequences in the entire show. SpongeBob tries to catch the next bus. Each time one approaches, something stops him. He gets distracted. He drops something. He turns away for a second. Every single time, the bus pulls up while he is not looking, opens its doors, and pulls away again before he can react. The episode shows this happening over and over, not as a quick joke, but as a slow, grinding loop of failure. He runs, he shouts, he waves his arms. The bus leaves. He sits down. Another bus pulls up. He runs. The bus leaves. He sits down. The cycle keeps going. Each time his confidence drops a little more. His voice gets quieter. His shoulders sink lower. His hopeful smile starts to crack. The bright, eager SpongeBob from the start of the episode is slowly being worn down by the simple, repeated failure to do the one thing he needs to do. Get on a bus, go home. He finally goes inside the bus station to ask for a schedule. He waits in a long line. When he finally gets to the front, the worker tells him, in raspberry language that he can barely follow, that the last bus to Bikini Bottom leaves in 5 seconds. The bus pulls away before SpongeBob can even turn around. The lights in the bus station shut off. The worker leaves. SpongeBob is alone. The terminal is empty. The town is empty. Nobody is around. Then he says the line. He looks around at the dark, empty terminal, takes a breath, and says, "Advanced darkness." 2 simple words. The way Tom Kenny delivers them, quiet and small, with a slight tremor in his voice, has stayed in the heads of viewers for decades. There is no music. There is no joke. It is a small character standing alone in a place he does not understand, finding new vocabulary for a kind of fear he has never felt before. He hears a sound, a raspberry, faint in the distance, coming closer. He runs. He runs back to the cliff that brought him to rock bottom in the first place. He cannot climb it. The wall is straight up. There is no way home. The raspberry sound gets closer. SpongeBob curls up into a ball, ready to face whatever is coming for him in the darkness. The thing that has been making the noise turns out to be a friendly anglerfish, the same one SpongeBob met earlier in the episode. The fish hands SpongeBob his lost glove balloon and inflates it, allowing SpongeBob to float back up to Bikini Bottom safely. The episode ends. SpongeBob escapes, but the feeling that rock bottom leaves behind does not go away. The episode never raises its voice. It never shows a monster. It never plays scary music. The horror of rock bottom is not a creature jumping out from behind a wall. The horror is the slow, grinding feeling of being stuck somewhere you do not understand, surrounded by people you cannot communicate with, watching the way home leave without you over and over again, with the daylight fading and nobody coming to help. It is a feeling that does not exist in most children's shows. It is closer to anxiety and depression than to fear. That is part of why the episode has stayed with fans. Anyone who has ever felt completely lost, anyone who has ever felt invisible in a public space, anyone who has ever watched an opportunity slip away one too many times and felt the slow weight of helplessness, recognizes rock bottom immediately. The episode puts a feeling onto the screen that most adult dramas struggle to capture, and it does it in 11 minutes, in a children's cartoon with a yellow sponge and a balloon. This is where the theory comes in. Rock bottom is, on the surface, just a strange town deep in the ocean. The show treats it as a separate location, a place far from Bikini Bottom, a place SpongeBob ended up by accident. The episode does not explain why the creatures there are so different. It does not explain why they speak a different language. It does not explain why the town is so dark, so dim, so strange. The episode just drops SpongeBob there and lets him find his way out. Fans have spent years trying to fill in the blanks. The theory that has stuck around the most is one that connects directly back to the very first thing that was confirmed about this show, the radiation theory, the Bikini Atoll theory, the thing that explains why anyone in this universe can talk in the first place. The theory says rock bottom is a nuclear bomb crater. The bombs that were tested at Bikini Atoll did not all go off in the same place. They did not all hit the water in the same way. Some were detonated in the air, some were detonated on the surface, and some, including a famous test, were detonated underwater, leaving behind enormous craters in the seafloor. Real craters, real holes, real damaged ocean floor that exists to this day. If Bikini Bottom is the town that grew up around the edge of those tests, where the radiation was strong but not strongest, then the deepest crater would have been the place where the tests hit hardest, the very center of the destruction, where the radiation was the most intense, where any creature unlucky enough to be there would have been changed the most. That place in the show is rock bottom. The fan theory was originally spread on Reddit and gained traction over the years. It explains nearly everything about the episode that the show itself never bothers to. The creatures in rock bottom are deep sea animals, the kinds of fish that live in the most damaged parts of the ocean. They have been mutated more than the residents of Bikini Bottom. Their language has changed. Their bodies have changed. Their entire culture has changed. They are the stranger, more broken siblings of the creatures who live up above. They are what happens when the radiation gets concentrated instead of spread out. The 90-degree cliff that takes the bus down to rock bottom would, in this theory, be the wall of the crater itself. The depth at which rock bottom sits would be the bottom of the hole the bombs left behind. The town would have grown up over decades inside that hole, its residents adapting to the darkness, the pressure, the changed water chemistry, the lasting damage. They would not even know their world was a crater. They would think it was just where they lived. In 2021, an anonymous staffer working at Nickelodeon told the website Cracked something interesting about how the people who work on the show talk about rock bottom. The staffer said that the radiation theory, including the part about rock bottom being a crater, was treated within the network as accepted background lore. They called it well-accepted fanfic. They said the theory came up in internal discussions. They said it was the thing that finally sold them, personally, on the entire radiation framework. The crater explanation made too much sense to ignore. This was 3 years before Mr. Lawrence confirmed the radiation theory in the Esquire interview. So even before the official confirmation, the people building the show were treating the rock bottom crater idea as something that fit, something the writers and the staff had quietly accepted as the underlying truth, even if if the show itself never came right out and said it. There is also a deeper reading of Rock Bottom that lives alongside the crater theory. The episode is widely seen by fans and critics as one of the best portrayals of anxiety and depression in any animated show. The way SpongeBob slowly loses his confidence, the way his attempts keep failing, the way the town keeps not making sense, the way the lights go out, the way nobody helps him, the way he ends up curled up in a ball at the bottom of a wall he cannot climb. All of this maps onto the lived experience of mental health struggle in a way that hits very close to home for many viewers. CBR ranked Rock Bottom number 10 on their list of the darkest SpongeBob episodes in 2023. Collider gave it a similar position on their list. The episode comes up again and again whenever people talk about which SpongeBob episodes hit harder than they should. Combine the crater theory with the anxiety reading, and the episode becomes something genuinely heavy. Rock Bottom is the deepest, most damaged part of the SpongeBob universe. It is the place where the bombs hit hardest, where the radiation lasted longest, where the creatures are the most strange and broken. It is also the place where the show's most cheerful character experiences his lowest moment. The geography mirrors the emotion. Going down to rock bottom in this show means going to the place where everything has gone the most wrong, both physically and inside SpongeBob's own head. The episode ends with him escaping, floating back up to Bikini Bottom on a balloon, returning to the bright, colorful, friendly town he calls home. He never talks about what happened. He never mentions Rock Bottom again. The experience just becomes something he carries. There is a season 5 episode where SpongeBob briefly returns to Rock Bottom for a different reason, and the town looks just as strange the second time. The creatures still speak in raspberry language. The lights are still dim. Whatever was wrong with the place the first time is still wrong. The town did not improve. The damage did not heal. Whatever happened down there is permanent. This is what makes the crater theory feel right. Real nuclear bomb sites do not heal in 20 years. They do not heal in 50. The damage lasts. The radiation lingers. The animals that adapt to that environment stay adapted. Rock Bottom, in this reading, is a permanent record of what the bombs did. A place that will never quite be normal, no matter how much time passes. Bikini Bottom, by contrast, has had more time to recover. The creatures there are still mutated, still speaking, still living strange anthropomorphic lives, but they have built a kind of normal world. They have schools, they have jobs, they have restaurants, they have moved on, or at least built something on top of the damage that lets them pretend they have moved on. Rock Bottom never moved on. Rock Bottom stayed inside the wound. The contrast between the two places, sitting in the same ocean, is the show quietly drawing a map of what happens to a damaged ecosystem over time. Some parts grow over the scar. Some parts are still the scar. The bus that goes down there leaves and comes back. The creatures that live there are stuck in their environment forever. Once a person sees this, an entire layer of the show opens up. The cheerfulness of Bikini Bottom looks more deliberate. The strangeness of Rock Bottom looks more meaningful. The whole world starts to feel like a long, quiet meditation on what survives a disaster, what changes, and what stays broken. Bikini Bottom, then, is the recovery zone, the place where things have built themselves back up, even if the underlying truth is still the same. The creatures here are mutated, but they have made peace with what they are. They go to work, they raise families, they try to live normal lives. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The most normal life of all, on the surface, belongs to a sweet yellow sponge in a pineapple house with two parents who love him, a mom and a dad who visit him from out of town, who come to his birthday parties, who give him gifts on his special days. A nice, simple little family. Two parents who, for a sponge whose biology is supposed to follow certain rules, do not quite look the way they should look, and whose existence raises a question the show has never sat down to answer. Section 8. SpongeBob's parents and the round sponge problem. Real sea sponges, the actual creatures that live on the ocean floor in real life, do not look like SpongeBob. They look nothing like him. Real sea sponges are round, lumpy, brownish, soft textured organisms that sit on rocks and coral and filter water. They have no faces. They have no eyes. They have no shape that anyone would call square. They look closer to a strange, irregular potato than to a kitchen cleaning tool. SpongeBob, the character, looks like a kitchen sponge. The bright yellow rectangle with the holes in it. The kind of sponge a person would pick up at a grocery store to wash dishes. He is not based on a real sea sponge at all. He is based on the artificial cleaning product. The square shape, the clean edges, the geometric body, all of it comes from a manufactured object object, not from anything in nature. This was a deliberate choice by Stephen Hillenburg. He spent years before SpongeBob working as a marine biologist, teaching kids about ocean life at the Ocean Institute in California. He knew exactly what real sea sponges looked like. He had drawn them, studied them, taught lessons about them. His original character design, going back to his 1989 educational comic book called The Intertidal Zone, featured a sponge character called Bob the Sponge, who was actually shaped like a real round sea sponge. When Hillenburg started developing the character that would eventually become SpongeBob, he made a conscious decision. The realistic round sponge was not funny enough. It did not pop on screen. It did not have the kind of visual identity that would carry a TV show. So he changed the design. He made his main character a square, a kitchen sponge instead of a sea sponge. The change was about comedy, not biology. The square shape would let SpongeBob have a clean silhouette, sharp animation lines, and a face that would read clearly on screen. This was the design that became the most famous animated character of his generation. But the change created a problem the show has never quite been able to solve. When SpongeBob's parents first appeared in the season 1 episode Home Sweet Pineapple in 1999, they did not look like their son. They were drawn as round, brownish, lumpy sea sponges. They look like real sea sponges. They look like the original Bob the Sponge from Hillenburg's comic book. They look like the natural creatures that actually live on coral reefs. Two round, brown, naturally shaped sponges, with one square yellow, manufactured-looking child. The names of the parents were established gradually. SpongeBob's father is Harold SquarePants. He has a gray mustache, glasses, and a tall white hat. His mother is Margaret SquarePants. She has black hair, a purple dress, lipstick, and a pearl necklace. They are voiced by Tom Kenny, who also voices SpongeBob himself, and Serena Irwin. They live in a retirement community called Avocondo Acres, where they reside in a house made out of an avocado. They visit their son sometimes. They watch his school performances. They give him gifts on holidays. They love him deeply. They are, by all the rules the show has set up, his real biological parents, and they are shaped completely differently from him. The show has never directly explained this. There has never been an episode where the family difference is addressed. There has never been a flashback that shows how a son shaped like a kitchen sponge came from two parents shaped like sea sponges. There has never been a line of dialogue where SpongeBob asks his parents why he looks the way he does. The show simply moves on. It treats the difference as if it were not a difference at all. The family hugs. The family laughs. The family eats meals together. The shape of their bodies is a non-issue inside the world of the show. But for fans paying attention, the inconsistency is impossible to miss. Stephen Hillenburg gave a partial explanation outside of the show, in interviews and behind-the-scenes commentary. The reason the parents look round, he said, is that their design is a callback to the original natural sponge that he had drawn before changing SpongeBob to a square. Harold and Margaret are visual reminders of what SpongeBob looked like in the original comic book. They are connected to the deeper history of the character. They are a tribute to the version of SpongeBob that existed before the kitchen sponge redesign. This makes sense as a behind-the-scenes choice, as a creative decision, as a quiet nod from the creator to his own earlier work. But it does not explain anything within the world of the show. Inside Bikini Bottom, there is no reason for SpongeBob to look so different from his parents. Inside Bikini Bottom, the difference simply exists, unaddressed, never solved, sitting there for any viewer who happens to notice. The trivia book about the show, written in 2000 by former writer David Fain, has a small line that hints at the explanation the writers privately agreed on. It says that SpongeBob got the square gene. He is made of cellulose, like his parents, but his shape is the result of some kind of family genetic trait that occasionally produces a square sponge instead of a round one. This is the closest thing to an in-universe answer the show has ever offered, and it is offered in a side reference book, not in the show itself. Most fans have never seen it. Most fans assume the question is simply unanswered. The other piece of the mystery has to do with where the parents actually live. In Home Sweet Pineapple, when the parents come to pick SpongeBob up after nematodes destroy his pineapple house, they drive him away in their car. As the car leaves, SpongeBob waves out the window and says goodbye to Bikini Bottom. The line is small, quick, almost easy to miss, but it confirms something the show has continued to support over the years. SpongeBob's parents do not live in Bikini Bottom. They live somewhere else. SpongeBob moved away from home at some point and settled in Bikini Bottom on his own. For a character who is treated, for most of the show, as essentially childlike, the idea that he moved out and built an independent life elsewhere is its own quiet mystery. Where did he grow up? When did he move? Why did he move? The show has hinted at some of this, but never directly answered any of it. The retirement community of Avocado Acres, where the parents live, is described in later episodes as being far from Bikini Bottom. It is a separate town, a separate community. The parents drive to visit their son. They make a trip out of it. They are not nearby. This raises another question. If SpongeBob's parents look like real sea sponges and they live somewhere else, are they part of a different community of sponges who all look like them? Are there more round, brown, natural-looking sponges out there in some other part of the ocean? Is Bikini Bottom unusual? Is the square shape something that exists only here, or something specific to SpongeBob himself? The show has not answered this either. What the show has done over the years is build out a much larger SpongeBob family tree. Some of the relatives are square, some are round, some look like SpongeBob, some look like his parents. The variation suggests that the family carries both kinds of sponge bodies, and that different members of the family come out looking different ways. SpongeBob's grandfather, Grandpa SquarePants, was square. His grandmother, Grandma SquarePants, is round. The family's history, going all the way back to ancestors like SpongeGar and SpongeBuck and the primitive sponge, includes both shapes. The square shape in this reading is not unusual. It is part of the family's genetic mix. Grandpa SquarePants is also a quiet mystery in his own right. He is referred to in the past tense across the show. He gives wise sayings that other characters remember. Grandma SquarePants lives alone. The implication, never directly stated, is that he has passed away. The show treats this very gently, the way real families sometimes treat the loss of a beloved grandfather. He is remembered, he is quoted, he is not present. Looking at the full family picture, what comes through is a family that has lived in or near this part of the ocean for generations. They have watched the world change. They have raised children who look different from them. They have moved away from Bikini Bottom in some cases and stayed in others. They are a normal family by the standards of this strange world, and yet, when a person looks at the parents standing next to the son, the visual gap is huge. SpongeBob is yellow, square, smooth, with clean lines and clean edges. His parents are brown, round, lumpy, organic looking. They could be from different species entirely. The show only works if a viewer agrees, silently, to accept the family as a family, without thinking too hard about why they look so different from each other. This is part of a larger pattern in the show. The biology of Bikini Bottom does not really make sense if anyone tries to push on it. Patrick is a starfish. His parents are starfish, but his sister Sam is a different shape and color. Mr. Krabs is a crab. His daughter is a whale. SpongeBob is a square sponge. His parents are round sponges. The family rules of this world bend in whatever direction the writers need them to bend in, and the show never offers a coherent explanation. The cleanest reading of all this is that Hillenburg, as a marine biologist turned cartoonist, knew exactly how strange these family combinations would be. He had spent his career studying real ocean life, real biology, real animal families. He knew that crabs cannot have whale children. He knew that round sponges and square sponges are not even the same biological category in real life. He knew, better than almost anyone, how impossible the family setups in his show would be in nature. He chose them anyway, deliberately, because the show was built on a kind of dream logic where biology bends to comedy, where families exist because the writers say they exist, where the question of how is less interesting than the question of why does it work emotionally. Mr. Krabs and Pearl work as a father and daughter because the show treats them that way, not because their biology supports it. Harold and Margaret work as SpongeBob's parents because the show treats them that way, not because their shapes match. The mystery sits there, quiet, waiting for anyone who feels like noticing. There is also a strange piece of trivia about Margaret SquarePants that is worth mentioning. Her last name before she got married, according to the show, was Margaret Bubblebottom. She married into the SquarePants family, which means somewhere out there in the wider sea is an entire Bubblebottom family that SpongeBob is biologically connected to through his mother. The show has never explored this. The Bubblebottom relatives have never appeared. They are an entire side of the family that exists only as a name in a piece of background information. What does Margaret look like compared to her side of the family? What do the Bubblebottoms look like? Are they all round like she is? Are they all sponges? Are they something else entirely? Once again, the show offers no answers. There is one more piece of the mystery that fits oddly into the overall picture. In the very early development of the show, when Hillenburg first pitched it, the entire concept was different. The original character character, before he became SpongeBob, looked different. The original world, before it became Bikini Bottom, was structured differently. There was a whole earlier version of the show that almost made it to the screen, with a different name, a different design, and a different tone, before everything had to be reworked at the last minute due to a problem nobody had seen coming. The version of the show that aired in 1999 was, in many ways, the second version of the show. The first version had been built and tested and recorded and almost finished before something forced the entire production to start over. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Almost nothing of that first version survived. The recordings were lost, the animation was scrapped, the original name was tossed out. Only a few pieces of evidence remain, kept alive by collectors and archive websites and old VHS tapes, hinting at the show that almost was. Section 9. The SpongeBoy Ahoy Lost Pilot. In February 1994, Steven Hillenburg sat on a beach in Baja California, in the south of Mexico, on a surfing trip with friends. He had a sketchbook with him. The sketchbook went with him almost everywhere. He had been a cartoonist on the Nickelodeon show Rocko's Modern Life, but that show was wrapping up production. He was looking for something new, something of his own. That night, around a campfire on the beach, with the sound of the Pacific Ocean a few yards away, he started drawing. The drawings were of underwater characters. He had spent years working as a marine biology teacher at the Ocean Institute in California. He had drawn hundreds of sea creatures, but these drawings were different. These were the rough beginnings of a cartoon idea. A sponge with a face, a starfish with a personality, a grumpy octopus, a small underwater city. The character at the center of the sketches was simple, a square shape with eyes and a smile. Hillenburg had decided, even at this early stage, that the sponge would be square instead of round. The square was funnier. The square would stand out. The square would look like a manufactured object, a kitchen sponge, instead of a real sea sponge. And that contrast would be the entire visual joke of the character. He gave the character a name, SpongeBoy. The show, in that first conception, was going to be called SpongeBoy Ahoy. For the next 3 years, Hillenburg developed the idea. He worked on the show in his spare time while finishing his work on Rocko's Modern Life. He drew character designs. He wrote story outlines. He built what is called a pitch Bible, a document used to sell a show to a network. The Bible included the characters, the setting, the tone, the stories that would be told, and concept art for the world. In the surviving pieces of that pitch Bible, the main character is called SpongeBoy throughout. His name tag in the artwork says SpongeBoy. His designs are recognizable as the early version of the SpongeBob fans know today, but the name is different. Everything else, the personality, the cheerful enthusiasm, the love of his job, the kindness, the catchphrase of being ready was already in place. In July 1996, with Rocko's Modern Life finishing production, Hillenburg pitched the show to Nickelodeon. He went all out. He showed up to the meeting wearing a Hawaiian shirt. He brought a small underwater terrarium with him, filled with toy figures of the characters he had designed. He played Hawaiian music in the background to set the mood. He did not just describe the show, he performed it. The Nickelodeon executives, including a man named Eric Coleman, later described the pitch as something they had never seen before. Hillenburg performed parts of it like a one-man show. He acted out scenes. He read dialogue in different voices. He moved the toy figures around the terrarium to act out moments. By the time he was done, the executives had to step outside the room because they were exhausted from laughing. They came back in and told him they wanted the show. He was given 2 weeks and a small budget to put together a pilot episode. A pilot is a single sample episode used to test whether a show actually works on screen. Hillenburg, along with creative director Derek Dryman and writer Tim Hill, started building the pilot. They settled on a story called Help Wanted. The story was simple. SpongeBoy needs a job. He goes to the Krusty Krab. He has to prove himself. He saves the day. The episode would be the first thing audiences would see of this strange new underwater world. The team built the storyboard for the pilot. They locked in the script. They started recording the voice acting. The voice actor for SpongeBoy was Tom Kenny, who had also worked with Hillenburg on Rocko's Modern Life. Kenny brought the same high-pitched, eager, childlike voice to SpongeBoy that fans would later associate with SpongeBob. The recording sessions for the 7-minute pilot were finished in 1997. The animation was being put together. Everything was on track for a complete pilot of a show called SpongeBoy Ahoy, starring a yellow square character named SpongeBoy. Then Nickelodeon's legal department made a discovery that almost ended the show before it ever aired. The name SpongeBoy was already trademarked. A company that made a mop product had registered the name SpongeBoy years earlier. The trademark was active, it was protected, and the legal team at Nickelodeon told Hillenburg that he could not use the name. He could not call his character SpongeBoy. He could not call his show SpongeBoy Ahoy. The whole thing had to change. This was not a small problem. The voice acting had been recorded with the name SpongeBoy in every line. The storyboards were drawn with SpongeBoy on every page. The character's name tag on his fry cook uniform said SpongeBoy. The show's title was SpongeBoy Ahoy. Every piece of the production had been built around a name that the studio could no longer legally use. Hillenburg had to come up with a new name quickly. The pilot had a deadline. The network was waiting. The team needed to lock in a replacement and rework everything that had already been done. The new name they settled on was SpongeBob. It was a small change in some ways. The first part stayed the same, Sponge. The second part, Bob, was just a small step from boy. The character would still be called Sponge for short. The same yellow square, the same enthusiastic personality, the same job at the Krusty Krab. The show's title would change from SpongeBoy Ahoy to SpongeBob SquarePants, with a new emphasis on his square shape as part of his name. The voice acting had to be partially redone. Tom Kenny had to go back into the recording booth and re-record any lines that included the original name. The animation had to be adjusted. The name tag in the animation had to be redrawn to say SpongeBob instead of SpongeBoy. Every reference to the old name in the script had to be cleaned up. The reworked version of the pilot is what aired on Nickelodeon on May 1st, 1999, after the Kids' Choice Awards. It is the version everyone knows, the version with SpongeBob, the version that became the first episode of one of the longest-running animated series in television history. But the original version of the pilot, the SpongeBoy Ahoy version, was made. It was animated. It was recorded. It existed as a finished or near-finished piece of work. And then, when the name change happened, it was set aside. The original tapes were not officially released. They were not put on DVDs. They were not aired. They sat somewhere in the studio archive, a complete but unwanted version of the very first SpongeBob episode, with a different name, different audio, different name tags, different everything. For decades, fans knew this version existed only through rumor. The basic story of the name change had been confirmed by Hillenburg in interviews, but the actual original animation, the actual SpongeBoy version of Help Wanted, was treated as lost. Nobody had seen it. Nobody could find it. It was a piece of animation history that had been quietly erased. The first crack in the silence came in 1998. Nickelodeon had put together a VHS tape called The Best of Nicktoons 1998. This tape was not sold in stores. It was given out only to people who worked at Nickelodeon Animation Studios as a kind of internal gift. A small number of copies existed. Each one contained behind-the-scenes content from various Nickelodeon shows. On that tape was an early version of the SpongeBob theme song. The version of the show on that tape was not the SpongeBoy version, but it was an earlier cut of the 1999 pilot, a version that came before the final version that aired on TV. It had a slightly different opening sequence, different credits. The early version of the United Plankton Pictures logo had not yet been created, so the tape used a placeholder credit that simply said "Created by Steven Hillenburg" over a sketch drawing. For years, that VHS tape was effectively unknown. The few people who had it kept it in their collections. Most fans had no idea it existed. There was no internet conversation about it because the people who owned it had not yet gone online to share it. In 2009, a clip from that tape showing the early opening sequence was uploaded to a website called RetroJunk. This was the first time the wider public got to see any version of the show that came before the official 1999 broadcast. The clip was short and grainy. It was the early intro, with no theme song, just sound effects and visuals. People who watched it realized they were looking at a version of SpongeBob they had never seen before. That was the beginning of the search. Over the next decade, fans started hunting for more. They looked at archives. They contacted former Nickelodeon employees. They scoured eBay for old VHS tapes. They put together pieces of the puzzle. In 2015, a fuller version of the pre-broadcast pilot was uploaded to Vimeo by a user. This version was longer and clearer. It showed the early opening sequence in full. It showed differences in the credits. It showed how the show had looked just before the final cut that aired in May 1999. The Vimeo upload was eventually taken down due to copyright, but it was uploaded again and again and again on different platforms, Internet Archive, various file sharing sites. Each upload would survive for a while and then be removed. Fans kept passing copies along. In 2016, a fan found a screenshot from a Nickelodeon Animation 25th anniversary video that showed a glimpse of the original SpongeBob version of Help Wanted. It was a single frame. SpongeBob was visible, with a name tag that clearly said SpongeBob. This was the first piece of visual evidence that the SpongeBob version actually existed in animated form, not just in storyboards. In 2019, a clearer image of the SpongeBob name tag was found and shared online. Then, slowly, more pieces emerged. Storyboards from the SpongeBob version started appearing on archive sites. The full storyboard for the SpongeBob version of Help Wanted, drawn in 1997, became available to fans for the first time. Reading it side by side with the final 1999 version, the differences were small but real. Every reference to SpongeBob in the script was a reference to SpongeBob in the storyboards. In 2025, a complete copy of what is believed to be the SpongeBob Ahoy pilot was uploaded to Internet Archive. The video was titled simply, by the user who posted it, as confirmation that the SpongeBob Ahoy pilot had been found. Whether this is the genuine, full, original 1997 pilot or a reconstructed version remains a matter of debate among fans. The footage matches what is known about the pilot. The animation appears to be authentic. The name SpongeBob is used. The pieces fit. But whether it is the absolute original tape from 1997 or a slightly later version that had already started incorporating changes is hard to know for sure. What is clear is that the original version of the show, the version with the original name, the original audio, the original name tags, exists in some form. It has been partially recovered. It is no longer entirely lost. The trade name that almost killed the show before it started, the legal problem that forced an entire pilot to be rewritten and re-recorded at the last minute, left behind a piece of cartoon history that fans have spent over 2 decades trying to put back together. Hillenburg himself rarely talked about the SpongeBob version in detail. He confirmed the name change, confirmed the trademark issue, confirmed that the original pilot had been reworked, but he did not dwell on it. He did not release the original recordings. He did not push for the SpongeBob version to be officially restored or shared. The new name had become the name. The character had become SpongeBob, and the show had become the show. There was no going back. The fact that the change happened so close to the deadline is what makes the story interesting. If Nickelodeon's legal team had caught the trademark issue a few months earlier, the entire production would have been built around the new name from the beginning. If they had caught it a few months later, the pilot might have aired with the original name, and Nickelodeon would have been hit with a trademark lawsuit immediately. The timing was almost exactly wrong and almost exactly right. Late enough that an entire pilot existed in the original form, early enough that the team could still rework everything before the public saw any of it. The world knows SpongeBob. The world does not know SpongeBob. But SpongeBob existed. He was animated. He was voiced. He was real, at least for a few months in 1997, before a legal phone call forced him to disappear and a new yellow square took his place. There is a strange poetry to this. SpongeBob is a character defined by joy, by enthusiasm, by being exactly who he is. And yet the very first version of him, the original draft, was killed by something completely outside his control. A piece of paperwork, a trademark filing, a name that was already taken. The character had to be reborn with a new identity before he could ever meet his first audience. That hidden history sits underneath the show. Most fans never think about it. The pilot they know is the one that aired. The character they know is SpongeBob. But for anyone who follows the breadcrumbs back, the older version is still there, in scraps of footage and storyboards and rumored tapes, waiting to be put together again. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The strange thing about this show is that even the things hiding in plain sight rarely get the attention they deserve. There is a character in the main cast who has been on screen since the very first episode, who lives with SpongeBob, who shows up in nearly every household scene, who has barely been examined by the audience, despite carrying clues that suggest he might be one of the most intelligent beings in the entire show. A small creature with a meow and an extensive secret library, whose true mind has only ever been glimpsed in dreams. Section 10. Gary the Snail's Hidden Intelligence. In a show full of characters who never stop talking, there is one main character who almost never speaks at all. He has been there from the first episode, lying around the pineapple house, leaving slime trails on the floor, eating his food, sleeping on his little snail bed. He has appeared in hundreds of episodes. He has been at SpongeBob's side for the entire run of the series. And in all of those appearances, in nearly every scene he has ever been in, his only line of of dialogue is a single word: meow. Gary the snail is, by the show's logic, what cats are to people in our world. Snails in Bikini Bottom are pets the way cats are pets on land. They meow, they have small beds, they eat from bowls, they sometimes refuse to take baths, they get jealous when their owners pay attention to other animals. The setup is a one-to-one swap. Snails replace cats, worms replace dogs. The world of Bikini Bottom keeps the same pet structure as the surface world, just with sea creatures filling each role. Gary, on the surface, is just a snail, a pet, a side character, someone who shows up to be cute, to need feeding, to get into small messes that SpongeBob has to clean up. He is rarely the focus of an episode. When he is, the story is usually about SpongeBob doing something wrong as a pet owner, like in The Great Snail Race, where SpongeBob pushes Gary so hard during training that he nearly destroys him. Or Have You Seen This Snail?, where SpongeBob neglects Gary so badly that the snail runs away from home. These episodes treat Gary the way pet stories usually treat pets. He is loyal, he is loving. He gets hurt when his owner forgets him. He comes back when he realizes home is the best place for him. Standard pet narrative. But scattered throughout the show, in moments most viewers do not pay much attention to, the show has been quietly suggesting that Gary is not a normal pet, not a normal snail, not a normal anything. The hints are small. They appear quickly and then vanish. They are easy to miss if a person watches the show casually, but once a person starts noticing them, an entirely different picture of Gary starts to come together. The picture is this: Gary may be the smartest character in the entire main cast. Smarter than SpongeBob, smarter than Patrick, smarter than Sandy, smarter than Squidward, possibly smarter than Plankton, who is, by the show's own statement, a mad scientist with a supercomputer for a wife. The show has spent 25 years dropping evidence of Gary's intelligence into the background, and the more a person looks, the more the evidence stacks up. The most direct piece of evidence comes from a season 1 episode called Sleepy Time. The episode's plot is that SpongeBob can travel into other characters' dreams while he sleeps. He visits the dreams of his friends, hopping from one dream world to another. Eventually, he arrives at Gary's dream. What he finds there is shocking. Gary's dream is not a snail dream. It is not full of food bowls and slime trails and yarn. It is a vast, beautifully detailed library. Books line every wall. The room is enormous, quiet, studious. Gary himself is in the dream, but he is not a regular snail. He is sitting upright in a kind of human-like posture, wearing a smoking jacket. He looks distinguished. He looks scholarly, and he speaks. In a deep, thoughtful, intelligent voice, Gary addresses SpongeBob directly. He uses sophisticated vocabulary. He speaks in full, complete sentences. He references books. He acts annoyed that SpongeBob has barged into his private mental space. At one point, he asks his owner whether SpongeBob actually thought his shell was full of hot air. The line is delivered in a voice that does not sound like a snail at all. It sounds like a professor, someone who has spent his life reading, someone whose mind is far more developed than the small creature with a meow that SpongeBob takes care of every day. This is, on the surface, a single dream sequence, a throwaway gag in an early episode, the kind of joke a viewer might laugh at and forget. But the gag implies something serious. The dream is happening inside Gary's head. The library is what Gary's mind looks like from the inside. The voice is the voice Gary would have if he chose to speak, which means Gary, in his actual real life, is choosing not to speak. He is choosing to live as a pet. He is choosing to communicate only through meows. The intellect is there. The library is there. The vocabulary is there. He just keeps it hidden. The show drops this bomb and then moves on. The next episode, Gary is back to meowing. The library is never mentioned again. The smoking jacket is never seen again. The voice never returns to that level of thoughtfulness in the regular show. Gary simply goes back to being the family pet. But the door has been opened. Once a viewer knows what is in Gary's mind, every other meow he has ever delivered starts to sound different. There is more. In an episode from season 2 called The Secret Box, Gary actually speaks out loud in the real world, not in a dream. He responds to a question SpongeBob asks him, and the answer is 2 clear words: meow, no. The meow is part of the sentence. Gary is saying no in English to a direct question. SpongeBob barely reacts. He brushes it off, telling Gary that he is just a snail and could not possibly know anything. The episode moves on without acknowledging that Gary just spoke a word that no other pet in the show has ever spoken. The way SpongeBob brushes it off is important. He is not surprised. He is not shocked. He treats the moment like it is normal, like Gary saying real words is something that has happened before, which means, in some way way the show has not directly explained, Gary has been speaking to SpongeBob for years, and SpongeBob has gotten used to it. In the first SpongeBob movie, released in 2004, Gary speaks again. The town of Bikini Bottom has been brainwashed by plankton, and the citizens are all chanting the same brainwashed phrase. All hail plankton. The chant goes through the crowd. Every fish, every starfish, every creature in town is repeating the same words. Gary chants too. In a flat, monotone voice, he says, "Meow, plankton." Once again, the meow is part of the sentence. He is saying the word plankton out loud. He is participating in human-level speech. The movie does not stop to point this out. It is just there, a small detail in a large action scene. But it is consistent with Gary's overall pattern. He can speak. He chooses not to. When he does, he often combines a meow with the actual word, as if he is keeping his snail identity alive while still saying what he wants to say. The pattern goes much further than just speaking, though. The show has shown Gary doing things that no normal pet should be able to do. He plays musical instruments, multiple ones. In an early episode called The Paper, Gary plays Squidward's clarinet beautifully. Squidward, who has spent his entire life trying to get good at the clarinet and has never succeeded, watches in confusion as the snail produces clean, controlled, melodic notes. In another episode called Procrastination, Gary plays the trumpet. In Something Smells, he plays the violin, using it to make sad music while SpongeBob chops onions. He is shown to be skilled at multiple instruments, without any explanation of where he learned to play them. He pays the bills. In an episode called Jellyfish Hunter, the show casually drops the line that Gary actually pays for the electricity in SpongeBob's house. SpongeBob is the one with a job. SpongeBob is the one who works at the Krusty Krab, but the bills, somehow, are being handled by the pet snail. This raises the question of how Gary earns money, where his money comes from, and why a pet would be in charge of utility payments. The show provides no answer. The detail is treated as a small joke and then dropped. He drives. In an episode called Tudor Sauce, where SpongeBob is trying to learn how to operate a boatmobile, Gary at one point takes the wheel and drives the boat through the most dangerous stretch of road in Bikini Bottom. He handles the boat with skill. He navigates obstacles. He responds to the road conditions. The only reason he gets stopped is the police, who pull him over for being a snail driving a vehicle. But during the drive itself, he performs better than SpongeBob ever has. SpongeBob, by the way, has failed boating school dozens of times across the show's run. Gary, who has never been to boating school, drives effortlessly. He has a record player. In an episode called Your Shoes Untied, Gary lifts up his shell and a small record player is revealed underneath. He listens to music in private, inside his own shell, like a person enjoying their own quiet hobby. The image is strange. A snail with a sophisticated audio setup hidden inside his body, listening to music while pretending to be a simple pet. He is royalty. In a season 4 episode called Rule of Dumb, the show reveals that Patrick is technically the king of Bikini Bottom by royal bloodline. The royal family tree is shown. As part of that tree, the show reveals that Gary and Patrick are related. They are first cousins. Their fathers were brothers. This means Gary is also part of the royal family. He carries royal blood. He has connections to the highest position of leadership in Bikini Bottom. The show treats this as a quick joke and moves on, but the fact remains. The pet snail is royal. He cites literature. In an episode called Chatterbox Gary, when Gary is briefly given the ability to speak, he uses sophisticated vocabulary. He describes SpongeBob using complex words. He shows a level of language ability far beyond what a pet should have. The episode is mostly played for laughs, but the way Gary speaks suggests that he has been absorbing language at a high level for a long time. He understands what other characters say. Throughout the show, Gary reacts to conversations he should not be able to follow. He nods at appropriate moments. He shakes his head when characters say something he disagrees with. He has facial expressions that match the emotional content of what is being said around him. When SpongeBob has an argument with someone, Gary watches like a person watching a movie, following the back and forth, reacting at the right beats. He is not behaving like an animal. He is behaving like someone who fully understands the language being spoken. He has medical knowledge. In an episode called Patty Caper, when SpongeBob is trying to figure out who stole the Krabby Patty secret ingredient, Gary actually gives him a description of another suspect, Squidward. Gary identifies Squidward, helps SpongeBob narrow down the list, and acts more like a partner in an investigation than a confused pet. He understands the situation. He participates in the problem solving. There is more. He has been shown to have a diamond hidden under his shell, a real, large, valuable diamond. Where it came from is never explained. He has been shown shown to have shoes, suggesting he has feet under his slime trail when he chooses to walk that way. He has been shown to have a body that is more complex than any pet should be, with enough hidden complexity that the show could keep revealing new layers of him for years and never run out of surprises. Now look at all of this together. A creature with a vast personal library that exists only in his mind. The ability to speak full English sentences when he chooses to. Skill at multiple musical instruments. The ability to drive a vehicle better than the show's main character. Royal bloodline. A hidden record player. Hidden diamonds. Hidden feet. The capacity to follow human-level conversations. The vocabulary of an educated adult. The thoughtfulness of a scholar. The patience to live as a pet despite all of this. The picture that comes together is not a pet. It is a being who is deliberately keeping his true nature hidden, who has decided, for reasons the show has never explored, to live as SpongeBob's small, simple, meowing companion, who could probably leave at any time, who could probably teach himself anything he wanted, who could probably, if he chose, take over the entire town. But he stays. He stays in the pineapple house. He stays in his little snail bed. He stays at SpongeBob's side. He puts up with SpongeBob's mistakes. He runs away when SpongeBob fails as an owner, and then he comes back when SpongeBob learns his lesson. He does the work of being a pet every day on purpose, when by every measure he is more capable than the person taking care of him. There is something almost moving about that when a person thinks about it. SpongeBob is not the smartest character in his own house. He is not the most capable. He is not the most well-read. He is not the best driver or the best musician or the most royal. The pet who lives with him is all of those things and more. And that pet has decided, quietly, year after year, decade after decade, to let SpongeBob believe he is the one in charge. To meow when a real word would do. To eat his snail food when he could probably cook a 5-course meal. To sleep on his small bed when he could probably build a mansion. The show has never explained why Gary lives this way. There has been no flashback, no origin story, no revealing episode where Gary explains his choice. He simply is what he is. A snail who has chosen, for reasons of his own, to spend his life in the pineapple house with a happy yellow sponge, watching everything, understanding everything, saying nothing. The sleepy time dream, the library inside Gary's mind, is the closest the show has ever come to showing what Gary actually thinks of his life. And the dream, oddly, is peaceful. Gary is not unhappy in his library. He is not bitter. He is not plotting. He is reading. He is content. He has built a rich inner world, and he is happy to live there. The fact that the outer world only sees a meowing pet does not seem to bother him. This makes Gary one of the strangest characters in the whole show. He is the only character whose true nature is so completely hidden that fans had to piece it together from 25 years of small details. Every other major character reveals themselves through dialogue, through action, through their loud, exaggerated personalities. Gary reveals himself through silence, through tiny moments, through one dream sequence and a few stray words across thousands of scenes. If a person were to make a list of the most intelligent characters in the show, ranked by raw mental ability, Gary would arguably be at the top. Plankton has scientific knowledge and inventions, but he also fails at almost everything. Sandy has scientific knowledge and a tree dome, but she does not seem to be holding back her intellect. Mr. Krabs is shrewd but greedy. Squidward thinks he is smart, but the show has shown again and again that his belief in his own intelligence is not matched by reality. SpongeBob is loving and earnest, but rarely thoughtful in any deep way. Patrick is famously simple. Gary, by contrast, has shown the deepest mind in the show, the largest library, the most refined voice, the most varied skills, the most evidence of hidden knowledge. He is, by the standards of the show's own canon, a genius. A genius who eats from a bowl and asks for food with a single sound. There is something in this that touches on a much older idea. The wise figure who pretends to be foolish. The scholar who hides among the simple. The royal blood who lives as a servant. These are story patterns that go back thousands of years. Hidden wisdom. The truly intelligent being who chooses humility over recognition. Many cultures have stories like this. Gary fits the pattern almost perfectly, even if the show has built the pattern accidentally rather than on purpose. What Gary actually thinks of his life remains his own private business. He has a library no one else can enter. He has a voice he chooses not to use. He has a mind that runs deeper than anyone in his world realizes. He keeps it. He protects it. He lives quietly inside it. And every day, in the pineapple house at the bottom of the sea, surrounded by mutated sea creatures who do not know what they are or where they come from. Gary the snail wakes up, eats his food, slithers across the floor, and pretends, beautifully, to be exactly what everyone expects him to be. The story of SpongeBob, taken all together, is the story of a world where almost nothing is what it seems on the surface, where bombs created the talking creatures, where lost episodes haunted fans for decades and eventually crawled into the show itself, where ghost stories made up to scare a coworker accidentally pulled real supernatural beings out of the shadows, where the most famous sandwich in animation history hides a recipe nobody alive knows, where a crab raised a whale daughter through pain nobody has ever explained, where every main character secretly stands for one of the worst traits a person can carry, where the deepest hole in the ocean became a town of mutants and a portrait of mental health all at once, where parents do not look like their children, where the original version of the show almost never reached the air, and where the smallest, quietest character in the whole Pineapple House is keeping the biggest secret of all. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.